Welcome back to the MedEdit podcast, your go-to space for evidence-based medical education and longevity insights that matter.
And the only podcast where two board-certified physicians break down the latest research and breakthrough in healthy aging and what that means for you, starting now.
Today, we're exploring the future of aging well, not just adding years to your life, but adding strength, clarity, and vitality to those years. Whether you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, the habits you build now shape your brain, bones, and body in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond.
And we're going to be talking about some of the groundbreaking research on aging that is in the works. We are breaking down fact versus fiction and bringing you education that relates to your daily life. So you don't want to miss this.
You're listening to the MedEdit podcast. Toss endless online searching to the curb. Let us edit out the noise and bring you medicine without misinformation. Welcome to the MedEdit podcast.
All right, so let's start by talking about brain health. So according to the National Institute on Aging, some mild forgetfulness is normal with age, which I can speak is already started, but dementia is really much more serious than that.
So the good news, studies have shown that staying active, connected, and mentally engaged can actually protect your brain.
Absolutely. In fact, a 2024 study in Nature Aging revealed that older adults who engage in complex tasks like learning a language or an instrument can actually build new neural connections in their hippocampus. This cognitive reserve can potentially help delay symptoms of cognitive decline.
As we age, maintaining cognitive fitness becomes increasingly important. The brain's ability to adapt and actually rewire itself is known as neuroplasticity. It plays a crucial role in keeping our minds sharp. Think of your brain like a muscle. If you challenge it in new ways, you can build resilience against age-related memory loss. So one of the people that is doing groundbreaking research in this area that we're going to reference is Dr. Andrew E. Budson. He's the chair of Science of Learning Innovation Group at Harvard Medical School. And so what he explains about neuroplasticity is that it's the brain's ability to learn, remember, and change when it's appropriate for the circumstances. This adaptability allows the brain to reorganize itself in a response to learning, experience, and environmental influences. So this cognitive fitness, the ability to think, learn, and remember effectively, depends on a healthy and adaptable brain. By actively engaging in behaviors that support this neuroplasticity, you can strengthen your cognitive function and potentially reduce the risk of age-related decline.
And I don't think it really surprises anybody that a healthy body supports a healthy brain. So your lifestyle choices are crucial and they matter. Starting young with the key approaches set you up for success later in life. And that includes eating a brain healthy diet, engaging in regular physical activity, making sure you are prioritizing quality sleep, especially when we're younger. We don't really do that as much. Challenge your brain. I mean, it's good to do something that's new and difficult that you find hard. Nurture your social connections, and also, as with everything, managing stress appropriately.
So going back to Dr. Budson and the research at Harvard Medical School, according to their published research, exercise is not just beneficial for the body. We keep talking about that nonstop here, but it also has powerful impact on the brain. So neuroplasticity is closely linked to the production of neurotrophins, a group of proteins that play a vital role in brain cell growth and function. Among the key neurotrophins involved in neuroplasticity is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, so BDNF. So research there suggests that lower levels of BDNF may contribute to this cognitive decline of the brain, affecting your memory, concentration, and learning ability. So their research with Dr. Budson highlights that aerobic exercise, so getting your heart rate up and sustained, plays a critical role in promoting neuroplasticity as it triggers the release of the brain growth factors. He says, from the perspective of the body, we know that the brain growth factors are released when we engage in aerobic exercise, and that is critically important. If you've listened to this podcast before, you have heard us preach the importance of getting at least 150 minutes of aerobic exercise per week. This is another reason why you want to do it. We talked about the cardiovascular benefits, but now we're really focusing on the cognitive benefits. Greater cognitive health benefits are actually even seen at higher levels of exercise beyond that baseline 150 minutes. So going back again, physical activity, both aerobic exercise and adding in that strength training, also increase blood flow to the brain and reduce stress and inflammation. Together, these changes improve mood, memory, focus, and processing speed, helping to preserve cognitive function and potentially reduce the risk of things like dementia, particularly in older adults.
And of course, nutrition is essential for a healthy brain at all ages. We do a good job of thinking about this with our children and how important their nutrition is, but it's just as important for us in adults. According to research, a nutritious diet plays a pretty significant role in maintaining cognitive function. And although the brain makes up only about 2% of body weight, it utilizes 20% of your body's energy. We preach the Mediterranean diet over and over again, but it has been associated with a lower risk of cognitive decline as well. The diet emphasizes fruit, green leafy vegetables, whole grains, fish, legumes, nuts, and healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil. Another diet that's, somewhat similar is called the MIND diet. It incorporates elements of Mediterranean and DASH diet. And there was a study published in the journal Neurology that shows that it may slow cognitive decline compared to other eating patterns. The MIND diet emphasizes plant-based foods and limits consumption of animal products and saturated fats. And of course, it also highlights green leafy vegetables, nuts, berries, poultry, and fish. And no surprise, on the flip side, a high-fat, high-refined sugar diet have also been linked to decrease in BDNF, that brain growth factor just mentioned above, and therefore could potentially decrease your neuroplasticity. This would be a reason long-term to not use diets such as the carnivore diet or the keto diet, as it may not be healthy for our brain, as potentially some other side effects. Avoiding excess sugar and processed foods can help maintain mental clarity and prevent inflammation that may contribute to overall poor brain health.
We all know the saying, you don't use it, you lose it, right? So, this definitely applies to cognition in your brain. Lifelong learning is essential. Once you're out of your learning phase, out of life with maybe school, whether it's, high school, college, doing some new kind of job that you have to learn, once you're really settled in your ways, you might actually have to find ways actively to challenge your mind. Becoming set in a repetitive pattern over and over allows the brain to become complacent. So don't wait until you're old to start this either. Yes, we're all busy with life, work, kids, but investing time into exercising your brain is more beneficial than any supplement you can actually take. By regularly challenging your mind, you can strengthen the neural pathways and support long-term brain health. So we may say that over and over again, but how do we actually do it? So we've got some tips from the Harvard Science of Learning Innovation Group again. Some of the things they suggested were try something new, learn a new language, instrument, or skill like painting or cooking. This forms fresh neural connections, and you don't have to be good at it. There is nothing in there. In fact, if you're not good at it, it might be better so that you can keep trying over and over and challenging your brain. Challenge yourself. Increase the difficulty of things that you like doing. Perhaps you like doing puzzles, games, or reading material, but you really need to actually challenge yourself. Don't just do the same comfortable puzzle over and over again. Increase the ability for your brain to have to think about it in a different way and adapt to it. Mix up mental workouts. Avoid routine by incorporating different activities like strategy games, creative hobbies, problem-solving exercises. Engage in cultural and social activities. Attending things like concerts, museums, or plays stimulates the brain and encourages deeper learning. Travel and explore. This is probably one of my favorites. Visiting new places, even locally, enhances brain plasticity by exposing you to novel experiences. Enjoy music and movement. Playing an instrument, again, like we talked about before, but even just dancing or listening to music supports cognition and that emotional well-being component.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting that you bring this up, because a lot of us people have commented, like when they see people retire, that all of a sudden they seem to just like go downhill. Like we've seen that with like in our own profession and others. And I wonder sometimes if it has to do with that just complete lack of challenge all of a sudden when you've come from something that is mentally as well as physically challenging on a daily basis. For some people, multiple decades, and then all of a sudden nothing.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like transitioning to something like that, where maybe it's not what you were doing before is a challenge, but something else is a challenge, kind of helps keep you young, as they say, basically.
Yeah. I encourage my patients when they're retired to go volunteer, have that plan well before they do retire. Is just have this plan. They don't have to, work themselves, till they're exhausted and get up and be at work at 8 a.m. But, do a volunteering schedule, figure out something that you can travel, but really fill up your days with more than just that repetitive pattern over and over again that your brain gets complacent with.
Absolutely. And we spent an entire episode devoted to the importance of sleep before, which you might want to check out. But remember, the long-term cognitive benefits of good sleep cannot be understated. So remember, stick to a schedule. Wake up and go to bed at the same time every day, even on the weekends. It's easier than getting out and then back into a routine. Morning sunlight is good. You want to expose yourself to natural light early in the day, which may help you regulate some of these sleep cycles. Of course, as we've said ad nauseum, exercise regularly, watch your diet. And as far as for exercise, everyone's a little bit different. I would say ultimately do it when you can, but just remember that some people, if they do intense workouts close to bedtime, may have difficulty falling asleep. And as far as for diet, it can help with sleep, eating a lighter dinner and avoiding caffeine, alcohol, spicy foods, and nicotine before bed. We've said this before, but some people think things like alcohol could potentially help. But we've shown that the sleep is usually poor quality, although it may help you initially fall asleep. And of course, limiting screen time. Turn off those electronics at least an hour beforehand and create you a nice sleep-friendly environment. Most people like to keep their bedroom cool, dark, quiet, and comfortable to help kind of increase that sleep efficiency. And obviously, establish a bedtime routine. So engage in calming activities like reading or stretching or meditation and deep breathing if that helps you.
Everyone talks about the supplements or vitamins they want to take for brain health and memory. I hear this all of the time. But often they're neglecting some of these areas we're talking about, and even other things like stress reduction and increasing the social interactions. So just make sure before you delve in, to all this, Instagram or, TikTok thoughts about supplements or vitamins, even starting young, that you are making sure you're checking off your list and all those other things that are more modifiable that have so many different factors beyond just memory. It affects your cardiovascular health, your bone health, GI. I mean, there's not a system in your body that isn't affected by things like sleep, stress, lack of social interactions, exercise, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. We're going to switch gears to some of the more, I would say, if there is a sexy side of cognitive function and research, this is the sexy side of it.
Oh, yeah. So over the last decade, a very large amount of research has been devoted to the science of aging of the body and the brain. There are a few notable studies we really wanted to highlight today and what their evidence is indicating, because it's kind of fun to hear about what's actually happening, right?
Absolutely. And I think for so long, we really focused on living longer. And I think we've very much realized it's not just about living longer, but living better and healthier. It's one thing to make it to an older age, but if you're not making there in the best possible shape that you can, it's not as beneficial or great as it sounds. So up first, we're going to talk about some foundational research that's funded by the National Institute of Health. And this is in the development. There's also some clinical trials for 2 new drugs regarding Alzheimer's disease. For those of us in the medical field, we know dementia can be a very difficult disease process for both the patient and their family. Often the common drugs used are best mildly effective and really best when they're used very early on in the disease. So some new research has shown that the drug lecanemab, which was FDA approved in 2023, has shown a clear, though modest, benefit of slowing the rate of cognitive decline in people in the early stages of Alzheimer's. An additional drug recently approved by the FDA is donanemab, which slows the rates of cognitive and functional decline in participants with early stage Alzheimer's. Both drugs work by removing amyloid, which is the main component of Alzheimer's characteristic plaques that form in the brain. So what does this impact mean? Well, in the coming years, we anticipate results from similar clinical trials that will really sharpen our view on how these anti-amyloid therapies may actually be harnessed, either alone or in combination with some other novel therapeutic strategies. Hopefully, we're going to be reducing the burden of Alzheimer's dementia and other related dementias.
So the second area of research we want to highlight are the new frontiers in what's called fighting cellular senescence. So according to the National Institute of Health and the National Institute on Aging, research has increased with the focus on a certain kind of cells called senescent cells. A senescent cell actually just no longer divides, which cells should divide for normal process and function. And so it's just not functioning properly at that point, but it doesn't die off. Instead, it just persists and just sits there and can trigger things like inflammation and release other kind of factors that damage healthy cells around it. So senescent cells accumulate with age and are thought to play a role in many age-related diseases, including potentially dementia. A study in mice showed that senescent immune system cells are potentially harmful type of senescent cells because they can spread tissue damage and result in rapid aging across other body organs and systems. In addition, recent mouse studies support the potential for senolytic drugs, so drugs that actually selectively eliminate these senescent cells, for rejuvenating or reversing certain characteristics of age-related conditions. So examples include reduced inflammation, improved cognitive function, improved metabolic function, better immune response, and reduced tissue damage. One of the studies that I was looking at specifically was talking about like chronic back pain, degenerative disc disease in the back, things like that, and really understanding how we can maybe reverse or slow down some of this. So what does this impact mean? So continued research in this area is beginning to yield insight into the use of therapeutics for this cellular senescence. Future development of these senolytic drugs could help slow or reverse the impact of multiple age-related conditions. The NIH actually launched the Cellular Senescence Network in 2021, which is a really cool, powerful, open science resource for investigators in this promising field.
Very cool. One area of exciting research that has a lot of increased evidence being collected lately is on creatine monohydrate and cognitive function. So creatine is a compound that comes from it's like 3 amino acids, and the monohydrate form is the most identical to the endogenous creatine that we produce in our liver, our kidney, and our pancreas, and is really mostly found in the muscle and the brain. Now, some of you hear this trigger word and you think about like the supplements and bodybuilders, and if you're my age growing up, and that's what like literally every high school college dude was taking, and that's kind of what everybody thinks of. But we're not talking about that. Okay. So just forget about it. We may touch on creatine and the use in exercise and muscle recovery in another episode, but right now we're going to talk about it in the brain. And partially this is because there was a systematic review that was released in 2024 looking at the studies that were done regarding creatine and brain health. It is an essential brain compound, and some hypothesize that it could aid cognition by improving the energy supply and thus neuroprotection. Now, I will say, because even with this systematic review, you have to look at what's included. So there were 6 studies that were included in this review for a total of only about 280 patients, which isn't a ton. It's not that many. Okay. Mm-hmm. But generally overall, there was evidence that short-term memory and intelligence/reasoning may be improved by creatine administration. The other areas that looked at, such as long-term memory, spatial memory, attention, executive function, word fluency, reaction time, the results were somewhat conflicting. But again, when you only have 280 patients, you really cannot make a definitive statement. Overall findings did suggest that there is a potential benefit for aging, especially in specific individuals. And they looked at people who were more likely to be sleep deprived or have a very high amount of stress, however they define that. And one of the studies they actually saw the biggest improvement in, or that actually favored towards significant, is vegetarians.
Oh, me. Oh,
yeah, exactly. Okay. Which it's hard to know if that was because of more of the diet changes or because of the, creatine. I don't know. But anyways, that's the areas they looked at. So since that came out, there's actually been future studies on this that they've been releasing information about. There was a pilot study that was actually done, and I think it was at Kansas, looking at specifically creatine in Alzheimer's patients, which actually did show the potential to boost cognition. Unfortunately, dosages have been all over the place. So 3 to 5 milligrams a day is what we see most commonly, but especially in the Alzheimer's study, they were looking at all the way up to 20 milligrams a day. So it's a very exciting area of research. And so far, the safety profile has been good. So I think it's an area that can continue. I've also looked at it potentially in the connection with depression, traumatic brain injury, and also concussion recovery as well.
I think that's super interesting. And obviously there's a lot we need to figure out before we start saying that you can just start taking creatine supplements for, for the brain health purpose and stuff. And then we have to put a caveat in there. I see some patients who do it for more muscle recovery in large amounts. And we sometimes have issues with lab work where we can't tell if, their renal function is being affected negatively by the supplement. Is the supplement giving a falsely elevated reading, or is there an underlying kidney disease situation going on? So definitely need to talk to your doctor about it, or let them know at least you're taking it. So when they look at your labs, they can interpret them correctly.
Absolutely. And I will say in general that most of these studies were really that like 3 to 5 milligram dose, which is fairly low. So if you're looking at it for more of like the muscle building, that's not what we're talking about. So I just want to remind people of that. The next area of research we want to highlight is often overlooked, and it's linked to dementia, and that's hearing loss. So there is emerging evidence suggests a link between sensory loss, cognitive decline, and dementia risk, and then taking steps to address these conditions may reduce a person's risk. So for example, results from the Aging and Cognitive Health Evaluation in Elders, which we're going to call the ACHIEVE study, that was funded in part by the National Institute on Aging, found that hearing aids slow the rate of cognitive decline by nearly 50% in older adults, and with hearing loss and specific risk factors for dementia. Another study showed that compared to adults who have no sensory impairment, those who with combined hearing and vision loss have even a higher dementia risk. So what does this mean? That half of people over 75 will have disabling hearing loss. And there is growing scientific evidence that addressing some of these treatable sensory related conditions may be an important strategy to reduce the risk of cognitive decline.
So the last research study I wanted to focus on was interesting to me personally, and that's the connection between music and memory. So I wanted to just take a moment to kind of talk about this one study. So Dr. Louie is a researcher at the Music Imaging and Neural Dynamics, the MIND lab at Northeastern University in Boston. She herself is a musician and a scientist who is working with some dementia patients. After little response from her residents with advanced dementia to Beethoven pieces she was playing on the piano, staff members were encouraging her to try something a bit livelier from a book of traditional folk songs. She said that she started playing some old familiar ditties and tunes, and then amazingly, some of the residents knew all the words and started singing along in close harmony, and just really struck her. So the science shows that our brains are hardwired to predict and anticipate familiar rhythms and melodies. It starts with the auditory cortex, the brain region that receives and processes sounds, including voices and music. According to Dr. Louie, when we hear something that we enjoy that engages not only the auditory cortex, but also the brain's reward systems that are driven by the neurotransmitter dopamine, which motivates us to seek out and learn that new information. Another key part of the brain's dopamine-based reward system is the medial prefrontal cortex, which also processes memories about ourselves. So Louis explains further that if you're listening to music that you've enjoyed throughout your life and that you find familiar, then the auditory system is active, but it's also communicating and connecting with that medial prefrontal cortex. So the NIH and the NIA, so the National Institute of Health and National Institute on Aging, published an article highlighting Dr. Louis' work with like-minded researchers in the Boston area at the Berklee College of Music and Harvard Music School, where they developed an 8-week mindful music-based listening program for healthy older adults. Participants showed stronger increases in functional connectivity between the auditory system and the medial prefrontal cortex, which are those areas that generally become less active with age compared to the control groups. Their team is now testing out this intervention in older adults with memory impairments, hoping that music can help revive learning and memory functions through its connectivity. Dr. Louis' latest project is called the Multimodal Musical Stimulation for Healthy Neurocognitive Aging Study, which is designing and testing a device that pairs music selected by participants with rhythmic colored LED light patterns. Supported by the National Institute on Aging small business funding, the technology is actually based on mouse studies in which Alzheimer's disease-related brain deposits of the tau and beta amyloid proteins we talked about before were actually reduced through light and sound stimuli. Louis and colleagues are working on prototypes to test the light and sound intervention as a potential therapy for older adults and for people living with mild cognitive impairment or dementia.
So what you're saying is basically the music is important when we're young with brain development and when we're older with brain development.
It's why we do that with kids, right? And maybe it'll be good for us too, because I find myself singing Old MacDonald quite a few times these days with my little ones.
Just preserving our cognitive development there as we get older.
Absolutely, right?
You know, and overall, I don't know about you guys, but who said that evidence-based cognitive research wasn't exciting? Because I'm excited.
I definitely nerded out to all that. I thought that was super cool, but that's just us.
Yeah, and we've looked at a lot of things over the years of making our body last longer, and so I'm very happy that we are investing some of those dollars and really focusing on how to make our brain last longer, because that's the part that most of us don't want to lose.
Absolutely. Okay, we're switching gears, guys. So we're doing fact or myth for misinformation rapid fire game. You know what time it is. Our favorite rapid fire myth busting segment. Let's go.
All right, we're going to read common claims about aging and you decide, are they fact or are they total misinformation? First off, doing crosswords daily prevents Alzheimer's.
Myths. So repetition helps. And I hear this quite often. They're like, well, I read or I do crosswords. Okay, that's okay. But new learning, really the new learning like we talked about before, like picking up a language or an instrument is far more effective for building cognitive reserve. Okay, how about walking regularly lowers your dementia risk?
That is definitely a fact. So we know aerobic activity improves cerebral blood flow and reduces cognitive decline by potentially up to 35%. It is best to load up on NAD+, resveratrol, peptides, anti-aging supplements.
Okay, this is a miss. While some of them show some promise, there's really not enough long-term human data. The best longevity tools remain simple and proven. Move your body, sleep well, eat real food, manage stress, and stay socially connected.
That's right. So we don't want to skip squats for serums, that's for sure. And some of these things are expensive.
Yeah, and a lot of them, like when they're even talking about some of the benefits, like specifically with NAD, it's really shown in mouse studies right now. And so when they try to translate it over to the human studies, all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's not really as effective as it was in a mouse. And so we're just not there yet.
Yeah, exactly. We may be at some point, and it's a super exciting area of research, but I'm always a little bit flabbergasted by how expensive some of these supplements are that I've seen. I mean, hundreds of dollars for sure.
Yeah.
All right, our next one. Drinking milk prevents osteoporosis.
So this is actually a miss. So milk does help, but movement, vitamin D, gut health, and hormones matter just as much.
I would agree with that.
Gut health affects bone health. What about that one?
I would say facts. Of course, the gut affects everything, as we have learned. And then there is a gut-bone axis, which is real. So your microbiome can influence bone density through nutrient absorption and inflammation control. All right, next. Muscle matters more than weight for healthy aging.
So that's a fact. So muscle mass is a better predictor of survival than BMI alone. What about it's too late to build muscle after 60?
Definitely a huge miss. You can gain strength at any age with resistance training, and it's never too late to start. All right. There's a supplement that slows aging.
Big miss. There are no magic pills. Lifestyle changes still outperform all the supplements in the long run. So if they go head to head, these lifestyle changes still outperform all of them. So what about a book called A Short Guide to a Long Life gives a great roadmap?
I would say fact. So simple, science-backed, and one of our favorites to recommend. And by the way, they didn't pay us to say that.
Not a penny.
before you come at us.
Reach out to the publishers and tell them that we love their book for sure.
All right. Myth equals busted. So let's age smarter.
Share this segment with a friend who's still buying powdered collagen and skipping their leg day. We're in this for the long game. So like we said a minute ago, I want to throw out that book recommendation. One of my favorite resources to give my patients is A Short Guide to a Long Life. It's a book written by Dr. David Agus. He is an oncologist. It's a simple but proven book that outlines daily habits to help you live longer and better. And again, we are not paid by them. I kind of wish they'd send me some free copies so I could send them to my patients for sure, but we'll work on that.
So before we close, here's a fascinating study you probably haven't heard about, but it might be the most inspiring one yet.
So a 2009 study published in Aging Health looked at centenarians, so people over 100, and found that they shared a surprising personality traits. They were optimism, emotional expressiveness, low neuroticism, and a strong ability to form close relationships.
Absolutely. So yes, lift your weight, sleep well, eat real food, but also, laugh more, love deeply, and don't take yourself too seriously. Your outlook might just really be the actual anti-aging secret.
We'll link this study in the show notes if you want to read it for yourself. It's really a fun one. But remember, the key takeaways from today: brain, challenge it with new learning, not just puzzles. Bones, move, fuel your gut, and lift weights. Muscle, it's your best longevity investment. And then, of course, just longevity. It's built daily. And when you're young, there's no shortcuts and no gimmicks. That wraps up today's episode of the MedEdit podcast. If you're a clinician, check the show notes and claim your CME credit.
And if you're already strength training and eating fiber, your future self, they thank you. All right. So tag us at the MedEdit podcast and let us know what anti-aging myth you hear the most.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the MedEdit podcast. Please click the follow button to be notified when more episodes become available. For more information about this episode and to find out how you can reach Dr. Cari Sorrell and Dr. Jessica Gray, please visit today's show notes. Be sure to follow us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to stay up to date on all things the MedEdit podcast. The information and content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute a physician-patient relationship. If you need medical advice or help, please contact your personal physician. The views and opinions of the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Dr. Jessica Gray or Dr. Cari Sorrell. This podcast should not be considered an alternative to medical advice or diagnosis or confirmation of an illness or disease. Please seek help from your personal care practitioner. Thank you for listening and tune in next time.